the answer to this question, given the nature of the question, may be a little longer than usual. The Honourable Barbara Edmonds.
Mr Speaker. To the Minister of Finance, when did she first consider the pay equity changes for inclusion in Budget 2025, and what modelling did she receive, if any, on the number of workers likely to be affected by the Equal Pay Amendment Bill?
The Honourable Nicola Willis.
Mr Speaker, upon becoming Finance Minister in December 2023, I was quickly made aware by Treasury of the amount of money that was built into the government's forecasts to meet future pay equity settlements. I was shocked by the size of the number, which had not been previously disclosed publicly and which had grown very rapidly. A significant portion of the money was set aside for the government to fund what is known as the funded sector, which is the non-government sector settlements. This is private sector, NGO or community service providers that the government contracts and therefore does not employ as its workers. The previous government had made a decision that meant the full costs of these settlements were being factored into the books, as well as the actual public sector settlements that the government wasn't obligated to fund. I took some time to receive advice on these issues, and I took proposals to Cabinet in April 2024 to adjust expectations around funded sector claims. This lessened the projected cost to the Crown of these claims, but only by a relatively small amount. As this pay equity reset was being implemented last year, it became clear that there were deeper, more underlying issues with the Act, which had a broad scope and had departed from its original purpose of addressing genuine sex-based discrimination. Last December, the Cabinet Strategy Committee discussed the high-level legislative settings for pay equity and indicated a preference to confront those underlying issues quickly. Mr Speaker, I outline all of this to make clear that in answer to the first part of the primary question, changes to pay equity settings were considered through last year and into this year, and as that work progressed since last December's Cabinet discussion, the financial implications were taken into account in Budget 2025 discussions. And in answer to the second part of the member's question with regard to the specific bill, I had previously received advice from Treasury about the number of workers involved in particular claims, but that is not the same as what the member is asking. By its very nature, and like other employment legislation, the bill affects all workers because anyone can consider their rights to make a claim.
Yep. Point of order, the Honourable Karen McNulty.
That question was answered in about 20 seconds. The first minute and a half was totally unnecessary, and giving you a prior warning that there's going to be a longer answer is proper process if the whole answer is required to address the question. It was not. That was abused as a way to try and rewrite history or to put forward their perspective as to what happened. That wasn't the primary question. The minute the Minister said in answer to your question, that's when the answer actually started.
That is the opinion of the member. It's not the way I heard it. And I've read the primary and would ask the member to do the same. I don't think the Minister stepped outside what is required to answer that question. I think it was an appropriate courtesy of the House to inform the House it would be slightly longer, but quite frankly, not all that much longer. The Honourable Barbara Edmonds.
Supplementary. How many women will lose the right to make a pay equity claim under these changes?
Good question. Mr Speaker, any woman who can demonstrate that she has a case with merit that she was discriminated against in her pay on the basis of her sex will be able to make a claim under this legislation. It will be a legal judgment as to which cases meet that test, and it is not for me in this House to offer a legal judgment.
So how were the Treasury able to quantify the savings from this policy if she doesn't actually know how many women will be affected?
Mr Speaker, what the Treasury had done as a practice under the last government was that because the last government did not allocate any funding in its operating allowances for pay equity settlements, did not allocate any money for those settlements, the Treasury formed a view that it was likely that those costs would otherwise be incurred by the Crown, and so they put them in the forecast. That is, they affected the surplus and deficit position. They formed those forecasts, I am advised, on an assessment of what they thought the claims would be, how many workers they thought would be affected, and what the costs were. But of course, the ultimate number of people that would be affected was determined by whether or not those claims were successful.
Supplementary. Does she stand by her statement that, quote, pay equity processes should be used for genuine issues of discrimination, unquote? And if so, which of the 33 cancelled claims were not genuine discrimination?
Mr. Speaker, yes, I stand by my statement.
Supplementary question, the Right Honourable Winston.
Can I ask the Minister, will any person with a pay equity claim be able to make one under the new legislation, or have some engaged in hyperbolic, distracting psychobabble?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I do think it is of regret that members opposite with a responsibility to their communities, I think, have made relatively misleading statements about the rights that are now available to New Zealand women who still have the right to equal pay and the right to make pay equity settlements, contrary to what some members opposite are trying to allege.
I beg your pardon? Are you now challenging my rulings of the House? Well, there wasn't, and it's not for you to make them or to require them, other than through a point of order. Barbara Edmonds.
Supplementary. How can she stand by her position that she is dedicated to pay equity when Te Tai Tokerau Principals Association have called it an appalling slap in the face for women, and Hospice New Zealand calls these changes a real kick in the guts?
That's right.
Because, Mr. Speaker, the government has a very clear position that it is upholding settlements for existing pay equity claims, and furthermore has created a transparent, workable, practical process for future claims to be raised. And what's more, because we have advanced that legislation rapidly, people will be able to submit claims the minute the Governor-General gives assent.
Start again. Supplementary.
Question 4.
Supplementary. Supplementary.
Oh, supplementary.
Thank you.
You're the next question as well.
Yes, thank you. Which of the 33 pay equity claims were not based on genuine discrimination?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm being asked for a legal judgment, which it is not for me to give, but I would also note that it is not simply an issue of whether the claims have merit.
Sorry. I can't have people chipping at me for not intervening in a question when it's very hard to hear the answer because of the barrage that's being directed at the Minister answering.
I would also note that it's not simply an issue of which claims progress, and I'm advised that it's expected that a number of claims will continue to progress. It is a matter of, once they are in progress, how they are assessed and the comparators that are used. And the government's concern has been that other market-based factors were being brought into the assessment. This law should be about gender and sex discrimination, not issues that are more properly dealt with through the normal bargaining process.